Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Graven. Our guest today is Michele DeFilippo. She's the founder of a company, 1106 Design LLC. She started that company in 2001 to work with authors, to help them, to help us, myself included, take advantage of opportunities in the changing industry of book publishing, providing one-stop publishing services from manuscript to market. I actually worked with Michele and her company on the last two books that I published, Measures of Success and the Mistakes That Make Us. So, Michele, it's great to see you again, and it's great to have you here. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Mark. I appreciate helping you and your audience.
I know we have a lot to talk about in the realm of what authors can or should be doing, or mistakes we can help them avoid. But before we get into all of that, Michele, in your career, the different things that you've done, what would you say is your favorite mistake?
My favorite mistake that actually worked out far better than I ever could have imagined was to move from New York City, where I grew up, to Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix is a great place to live. It's not a mistake to live here, but at the age of 24, I moved here without doing enough research about whether or not I could find a job.
Really?
Yeah, and so that turned out to be now what moment.
Right.
Because in New York, of course, there was no such thing as not being able to find a job. There were so many businesses that if you couldn't find a job, there was something wrong with you. So I worked in New York. I worked in publishing, and then I worked in the advertising industry. And in New York, the advertising industry was so big that pretty large companies sprang up to serve the advertising agencies. So that was the model I had in my mind when I moved to Phoenix. And before moving here, I looked in the telephone book. There was no internet then. So the only way to judge whether or not you'd be able to get a job was to look in the telephone book. And there were columns of ad agencies. So I thought, okay, I won't have a problem.
Yeah.
Well, after I got here, I discovered that those ad agencies were one-person operations.
Yeah.
And the owner basically did everything. And so it wasn't too long before I realized this was going to be more of a challenge than I thought.
So what sparked the move then? Was it a function of weather, or at least certain times of year the weather is fantastic in Phoenix?
Yes. My grandparents had retired here. So I had visited them a couple of times and loved it compared to New York. It was new and clean and beautiful, and the weather was great. So my husband and I at the time said, why not? We're young. We've got nothing to lose. Let's give it a shot. We had in New York at that time, we were at the crossroads of where we would have to move to a place that was 2 hours away from Manhattan and commute every day to work.
Right.
So we knew we didn't want to do that. And so Phoenix just seemed like a great idea.
Well, I guess, it's one of those decisions in life. You think, what's the worst could happen? You could always move back to New York. You could move someplace else. Was that part of the mindset?
Oh, yeah.
Being young and flexible?
Yeah, that was definitely the calculation. We didn't have any children yet. So it was like, why not? What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah. So then what happened job-wise or career-wise? Or, how long were you wondering, gosh, was this a mistake, or could you make the best of it?
Well, I did eventually find a job here, but it turned out that graphic design wasn't valued in Phoenix the same way it was valued in New York. And so the best I could do was make minimum wage. And that was really discouraging. I worked at print shops, I worked at defense contractors, I worked all kinds of places, and could only earn minimum wage. And the same was happening with my husband. He had worked at the Postal Service in New York, so he was used to making a good salary. I was used to making a good salary, and all of a sudden we're now in the lower tier of things and have to worry about how we're going to buy groceries. So I did that for 4 or 5 years, and back then, again, there was no computers. So in order to put a graphic design page together, you had to buy typesetting from a separate company and bring it home and cut it and paste it into place.
Like
So
cutting, so in a computer, when we cut and paste, you were
yeah,
using scissors and
yes,
paste or glue.
yes, we actually did razor blades and glue
Okay.
to assemble a page in the way you wanted it to look. But first, you had to order the typesetting, what you wanted, and then bring it home to paste it up.
Yeah.
So one day I was sitting in my typesetter's office waiting for her to finish my job, and I happened to ask, and I was probably making $3 an hour at that point in Phoenix. And when I just happened to ask her, I said, "What do you charge per hour?" And she said $50 an hour. So that kind of got my
Wow.
attention.
Yeah. Right. There's a big gap there.
Yeah, so I ran home and I said to my husband, "I know how to type. Why don't we start a typesetting business?"
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's what happened. I never ever in a million years living in New York would have thought of starting a business. It just wasn't something that would have entered my mind.
Ah.
So that's
So
how the
that's
mistake worked out.
there's the silver lining and then some.
Yeah,
Because in New York, you would have been happy with a job and a career because that was there. It wouldn't have pushed you to go do something different.
oh yeah, and even my upbringing, I wouldn't have heard the word career, right? It was always about getting a job. My father worked for a utility company in manholes,
Yeah.
so getting a job and putting food on the table was the height of their ambition for anyone, themselves or for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I'll say, I mean, I'm the same way. They say entrepreneurs tend to grow up in an entrepreneur family. My dad was an engineer who worked for the same company for 40 years. My mom was a stay-at-home mom and became a teacher. And so, yeah, I had no idea or notion about starting a business or being an entrepreneur until much later. I guess I would say it was graduate school.
Hmm.
Kind of open those possibilities. And for you, it was both like necessity and opportunity.
Yes, yes.
So how did that go with the typesetting business?
Oh, it was. I actually repeated the mistake because I didn't know the first thing about owning a business when I did it.
A lot of people don't. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's we did the calculations, and at that time typesetting machines cost $35,000. So we calculated that to rent an office and lease a machine would be about, I don't know, $3,000 or $4,000 a month, and that we could handle that worst case scenario if nobody ever walked in the door.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. And honestly, I can't claim credit for the success we had being of my own creation. I just had a lot of guardian angels along the way. People did walk in the door, and it just started out real small and grew from there.
Yeah. And then as things evolve, I'm curious then, starting 1106 Design, did you look before you leaped a little bit more with that business? Or I don't know the answer to how, like, I don't know the origin story of your company that I've worked with.
Well, that was another guardian angel story. I was in the library and I saw a brochure for the Arizona Book Publishing Association, which I had never heard of, and I thought, I'll go to a meeting. I'll see what that's all about. And I had worked at Crown Publishers in New York for a time,
Mhm.
so I said, okay, I've worked in publishing before. Let me see what's going on here. And that's when I learned about independent publishing. It was just getting started. That was around the late '90s, and independent publishing was just getting started. And I had the business, and saw that books were going to represent a really good opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then why the name 1106 Design?
Well, by 2001, it was impossible to find a domain name for a graphic design company. Everything I could think of was taken. So I used my birthday.
Happy November 6th. Or I assume you mean November 6th, not the year. It would be a mistake to assume it could be June 11th if you were doing the
Yes,
European format.
November 6th, yes.
Okay. 1106 Design.
And the
There's
unintended.
probably there's no other security questions in the company name, like your pet's name or your mother's
No,
name.
no. But again, another unintended consequence there is 1106 happens to put me first in just about every database.
So back in the days of the phone book, it was, AAA, pest control, and right.
Yes, still.
Still, yeah. Um, so I mean, let's talk more about publishing and the different dynamics. Like for one, when I talk to people, I generally say it's a mistake to call it self-publishing, because I know, at least for me, I didn't do it myself. The book would have been far worse if I hadn't engaged people as an editor, cover designer, and then with your company providing copy editing and typesetting and proofreading, and it would have been a mess if I tried to do it myself. So I do prefer that term, independent publisher. Thinking of me and my company, how do you talk through that with people if they're like, oh, I should self-publish?
Well, the problem is at the beginning of this industry, it was called self-publishing, and it was understood to mean that the author would be the publisher. Just like
Sure.
you described, you're doing everything the right way. Just like any other publisher would. You're
Right.
hiring the experts to help prepare the book, and then you get all of the benefits when you sell a book. But over the years, the term self-publishing has become misunderstood, and to a great extent now it means do-it-yourself publishing,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
is a mistake, because I don't understand why people don't see it as a mistake, because to me it's common sense that if you're not trained and you're not experienced in a line of work, that you're not going to get the same results as someone who is. But there's a lot of do-it-yourselfism out there, and unfortunately, that has given self-publishing, a bad name,
Mhm.
because there's so many. We've all seen the terrible books that result when people do it all themselves, and it's a shame, because in the beginning it was understood that self-publishing meant being the publisher,
Yes.
and continuing with publishing standards the way they existed at that time.
Right.
And it's just gone all haywire since then.
Yeah. And I mean, there are really good books that have, in some cases, some not so great covers. I mean, that does have an effect. There's that old cliche, don't judge a book by its cover, but people do, right?
Everybody does,
Yeah.
because that's the single thing that makes people stop and learn more about the book, right?
Yeah.
The cover and the title and the front cover text. Just got to
Right.
grab them, and you've got about 3 to 7 seconds to do that before they start scrolling away and looking at something else. So it's critical.
Yeah. And then there's a different dynamic of, back in the day, or even now. I mean, I occasionally go to a physical bookstore, but scanning a bookstore shelf is a very different process than searching and scrolling through an online retailer. Have you seen different trends in cover design, recognizing that people are going to be looking at a small image on screen?
Well, yeah, as a designer, you do have to keep that in mind, right? How is it going to look when it's 1 inch tall? That was not a consideration you had to worry about before online purchasing became possible.
Yeah.
But fortunate, and so yes, you have to be able to at least read the main title when it's 1 inch tall, and preferably more, but you can't take that too far, because if you make the subtitle too big, then you're throwing off the proportions of everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, I think it's where more and more books have, in a way, I mean, they're designed, but in the way they're plain. Like I see a lot of books that are really nothing but text on the cover. Like, fine, okay, we're not going to have any sort of other graphical elements, because they seem to be really prioritizing the words.
Yeah, when you search for any book, you'll find multiple concepts represented. It can be all text, or it can be a design where the picture dominates the design, or it can be a design where the picture and the text are of equal importance. But the important thing to work through with your designer is to discuss what are the best-selling books in your genre. What do they look like now? Right? What are the major publishers doing now? Because they have a lot of money and expertise behind everything that they do. So even though indie publishing is great in the sense that you can do what you want, it still makes sense to follow the lead of people who know what they're doing.
Mm.
Because even if you direct people to your title online, Amazon is not going to show only your book. They'll
Hmm.
show your book, but they'll also show those bestsellers that are close market matches.
Yeah.
And so if your book looks self-published and it stands out for all the wrong reasons, buyers are going to say to themselves, uh-oh, that looks risky. I think I'd better stick with the well-known author.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think, people look at my books in print and, it looks as good, or I think in a lot of cases better than what I've seen from publishers because of your guidance on everything from, how big should the text be and making it look, and your team know all the things about how to make it look like a traditionally published book or better. And I'm trying to think back to our discussions about the cover. I didn't have you and your team do the covers. I'd like to think, though, if I had come up with something terrible, that you might have pushed back or given me some coaching or advice, because I did consider you a trusted partner in this process.
Absolutely. That's our job, right? And you're not required to take our advice, but we always try to do our duty and explain why we're doing something that we're doing and why something you're asking for may not be a good idea. I recently saw a book by a really famous author. I won't tell you who. And I thought to myself, that cover looks really awful.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that such a prominent author would release a book with such a terrible cover. So I looked on the copyright page, and sure enough, it said cover designed by the author and the publisher.
Yeah.
And I
Mm.
thought, oh dear, it's the cover is about credibility, right?
Hmm.
Unless you're already famous, you have to make that instant first impression
Yeah.
that your book, whatever is inside those pages, is credible and reliable. And your
Yeah.
cover does that.
Yeah. And when I talk to people who are thinking about writing a book, and well, I've gone through a traditional publisher, and then I've been an independent publisher, and I tell people, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Is like, well, for better or for worse, when you are the publisher, you get to make the decisions. And I know people, like, for me, the biggest complaint or disagreement with the publisher was over price.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they wanted to overcharge for the book, which maybe made sense to them in their business model, but didn't make sense for me. I know other authors who have ended up with titles or subtitles or covers that they didn't like, but because they were going through a publisher, there's this question of like, well, it's like taking an investor in a business. You lose some control,
Oh,
depending on
yeah.
what the contract might say, right?
Yeah. And the thing about independent publishing, when it's done correctly, as you're doing it, you don't need to work with another entity called a publisher,
Mm-hmm.
right? All of the services and expertise you need are available to you to
Mm-hmm.
do whatever a publisher might do for you. And yet, it's a difficult idea to dislodge because we now have a whole bunch of publishers in the marketplace, that basically don't do much for the author except share their revenue from sales.
Well, and so I wanted to talk about that. So, there's traditional publishing and there's independent publishing. I think what you're alluding to is called hybrid
Um,
publishing more often, or
it goes by many names. Hybrid is one of them. Some of these companies will just call themselves independent publishing companies or self-publishing companies, which is an oxymoron, right?
sure.
Because if you're self-publishing, you don't need a publisher. But that's been forgotten, unfortunately. But I think from the author's point of view, the manuscript is done. They're asking themselves, now what? Which is
Hmm.
actually the perfect question to ask. But
Right.
I think they go toward a publisher because they think they need services.
Hmm.
And what's missing in the narrative is that these services are available,
Right.
and you do not have to go with an entity that not only controls your book but takes some of your money. And now these middlemen publishers are charging authors to produce the book. A traditional publisher never charged the author to produce the book.
Right.
And then they would take money on the back end when a book was sold in order to recoup that investment, which is perfectly
Right.
fair. But now these publishers are charging authors for the services to produce the book and taking money on the back end. And that doesn't work out too well for authors.
I mean, it seems like that creates all sorts of risk. So yeah, well, my understanding of the traditional publishing model is they'll set a price, they have their printing cost, which, and then they set a price, a discount to the retailer. I think typically 55% off the cover price.
It can be anywhere from 40 to 55%. Brick and mortar bookstores need 55% because they have a lot of expenses. But the online retailers, Amazon charges 40%.
Okay. Yeah. So the retailer, rightfully so, is taking a cut, and then the publisher of what's left is taking a cut that's larger than what they're paying to the author. But again, like they're like the angel investor in the book. The publisher is fronting the costs of all of those services that an independent publisher like myself and others, we pay that in upfront. We're making that investment.
Correct. But with these middleman companies, you're making the investment and they're also taking the back end.
That seems like the worst of both worlds.
Which is the worst of both worlds, right? So the question is, if you have, now to be fair, some of these publishing companies do participate and carry some of the expenses. Like, for example, the author may pay for the services up front, editorial and design, but the publisher will bear some of the marketing expenses. That's an ordinary partnership, and there's no problem there at all. But a lot of these publishers are charging the author for everything and still taking a cut of the revenue from sales.
Yeah.
So that's the question authors need to ask: is how are you calculating my royalty?
And how quickly or how frequently is it being paid? So, I mean, I know like my publisher pays me once every 6 months. I think it's 6 months in arrears. I have to trust the numbers that they're showing. But, when I have that direct connection to Amazon, I could see pretty much real-time sales numbers. I try not to go hit refresh too often. That's a mistake I think a publisher author might make. But, you can see those numbers on a daily, monthly basis. They pay once a month, and I think it's not as far in arrears. So I think, you've got the advantage of getting paid a higher percentage, getting paid more quickly. And it seems like there's a risk. What happens if a hybrid publisher business goes out of business, or
then
retires, or
then the author is out of luck. In fact, and it has happened a number of times with some very popular self-publishing companies that the company just disappeared, and they created the files for the author's book, right? And so they disappeared with those files. So if the authors wanted to continue to publish that title, they would have to start over. Right. Yeah. So that's the control that authors lose when they don't keep everything in their own neighborhood. Right. Yeah. And like you said, you can look at Amazon and see how many sales you have. You don't have to depend on anybody else giving you an answer about that. When you work with a publisher, what they're doing is they're uploading the book on their print on demand accounts. So they get the reports. You don't get the reports. They get the reports. They get the payment first, and then they decide whether or not they're going to pay you. Yeah. And there's been lots of abuse there too.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like authors really just need to research kind of the gamut of their options. And I mean, so many guests on the show have talked about a mistake that was born from a bad assumption. It seems like one of those common assumptions is I need a publisher, whether it's the traditional or some sort of book publishing service. That assumption. Right?
Yeah. And I feel sorry for authors, right? Because they're stepping into an area that they don't know anything about necessarily, right? So if it seems, another important thing to remember, if it seems too daunting to you to hire a cover designer and hire a typesetter and hire an editor and manage all of that, there is an alternative, and that would be companies like mine, where we manage the project for you, just as if we were publishing the book, but we're not your publisher and we don't take any money out of your pocket. We're just, you could think of us as a project manager.
Right. And at the end, it's a fee for service.
Right.
Customer customer
Right.
supplier partnership.
Right.
And I mean, there are things, to speak to my own experience, things that you and your team could have really helped me with, a lot of hand holding, but I already had the account on Amazon.
Hmm.
I didn't need help uploading the files I mean,
Right.
but if
Right.
somebody is doing that for the first time, especially, and they're afraid I might be doing that wrong, or, I mean, there's something to be said for getting that, kind of fuller range of support.
Yeah, but we always work with the author at the level they want. Like you said, in your case, we sent you the files and you uploaded them, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine if the author wants to do that. If the author feels uncomfortable about that, we'll upload the files for them and help them through all the distribution choices that they have.
Yeah. For somebody who's never looked into this, if somebody's written, let's say, a reasonably sized business book, or maybe the dynamics and everything the same for a novel, I tend to think nonfiction, because that's what I write and read. But how much of an investment does somebody need to expect to make to bring a professionally produced, independently published book to market?
Well, for us, a typical 200-page nonfiction book, full service editing, cover design, interior design, proofreading, ebook formatting, and distribution setup would be around $9,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's full service.
Right. And then, somebody could go through, you may even have a calculator on your website. And I will plug Michele and 1106 Design have a lot of information on their website and articles. And, if it's daunting, go read books about book publishing, or Michelle's got a lot of information out there. Do you have a calculator that kind of shows, I guess the hardest thing maybe is projecting how many copies are you going to sell, but looking at the royalties of independently publishing through Amazon and others versus getting publisher royalties?
Well, I know, first of all, nobody knows how many books you're going to sell, right? So if anyone
Right.
starts that conversation with you, you should run. Even
Yeah.
major publishers have their failures with all of their expertise and all of their resources. Sometimes a book bombs and there's nothing that they can do about it. I don't have a calculator on my website, but you've given me an idea now. Maybe I should. Do have
Yeah.
all of my prices, which isn't always done by some of our competitors. I want people to know what it costs, and they can sit there with their own calculator and add up the price of the services that they need easily.
Yeah. And they could do some, I mean, here's my engineer brain, MBA brain of you could calculate how many copies do I need to sell
Yeah,
to recoup
correct.
that upfront investment? How many do I need to sell independently versus how many do I need to sell from a publisher getting, let's say, a 15% royalty?
Right. And I would direct people there. They can find calculators at both KDP and Ingram Spark to find out what their royalty would be. But
Yeah.
they need to remember too that they set the retail price.
Right.
So the author sets the retail price. The retailer takes its wholesale discount. At Amazon, it's 40%. At Ingram Spark, the recommended discount is 55% because they feed the brick and mortar bookstores.
Right.
And then you deduct the printing cost, and then the rest comes to you. The bottom line is what you would be paid if you control everything yourself, right?
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. I mean, I think before you talk to anyone else, you should have that figure in your head so that when a self-publishing company offers you 90 cents a copy and you know you can make $8, you can cut that conversation short.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The and there's these calculators, like you said, Amazon, KDP, Ingram Spark. Say how many pages, black and white book
Right.
versus color, what
Right.
type of cover. You'll see what at least the printing price they're going to charge you
Right.
per copy. And I think that's one of the other biggest advantages, being an independent publisher. It's far less expensive for me to give copies away,
Yes.
because I can basically get them at, again, the printing cost that they're charging me. There's some markup in there, I'm sure, but it's far less expensive than the discount a publisher had previously given me.
Correct.
I couldn't give copies away the book. I'd have to sell 10 copies to give one away. And now those dynamics, that's, I think, another thing that tilts the scale in favor of being the publisher.
Yeah, because when you work with a third party, sometimes that publisher is marking up the printing price. You know, they may give you the royalty calculation, but they may be reporting a printing price of $8 when it's really $4.
Yeah.
So if you start with the information that's readily available to you, you can always have an informed decision. Look, different solutions are right for different people. There isn't one solution for everybody, but my goal here is to just let people know what the issues are so that they can ask the right questions.
Yeah. And make the right decision for them.
For them,
right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you talk about brick and mortar stores. It might be a mistake for people to assume I'm going to publish my book and I'll go through Ingram Spark and every bookstore chain is going to start selling my book. Like, it's a
No.
mistake to think that. No.
No.
What's a more realistic scenario?
More realistic is look at it from the bookstore's perspective, right? They have thousands of titles on the shelf. They don't want to deal with thousands of individual authors. Bookstores deal with distributors. And they'll deal with a company that can give them 500 books on one invoice.
Right.
And then there's the whole structure for returning books built into that, right? Sometimes if a buyer returns a book, people don't know if a book is on a bookstore shelf, a buyer returns it, they have to give it back to the publisher, and that's deducted from the author's revenue, right? Bookstores don't actually buy books; they display them on consignment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's another advantage of working with Amazon. They don't ding the author for returns.
Yeah.
Right.
But then there's an important factor where, and this is why I think Amazon and Ingram Spark come into the discussion. Barnes and Noble really doesn't want to buy books from Amazon as distributor.
No. We recommend that people use both Amazon and Ingram Spark together, right?
Yeah.
Because most of your sales are going to come from Amazon, so paying 40% for that makes sense just as far as it goes. And then Ingram Spark feeds the wider distribution network, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, bookstores, libraries, other distributors, and that's why they need the 55%
Right.
wholesale discount.
Yeah. And there's a difference between being on bn.com, where they do have unlimited shelf space, I guess, versus being in a physical bookstore where they can't cover, they can't hold everything. And I mean, would you say, like one argument, if somebody has a book that really is going to be a bestseller, and I mean, that would be an argument for going through an agent and a publisher, if you think this is something that could be sold in airport bookstores, for example.
Well, sure, you can always apply there. It's difficult. Agents. And first of all, never pay an agent. If an agent asks you for money, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
Legitimate agents are paid by the publisher, never by the author. So
for brokering the deal, and
yeah, but agents are overwhelmed with submissions. So if you do decide to approach an agent, absolutely meet their submission requirements to the T. Don't think you're the exception. Whatever they ask for, give them. Because otherwise you'll wind up on the slush pile pretty quick.
Yeah. What are your thoughts for an author who's thinking through, doing publishing an ebook and or a print book? I mean, there's some overlap in the editing and the work that goes into it. But what's your advice for somebody trying to figure out, like, do I need to have an ebook? Does anyone ever do ebook only in some circumstances?
Well, there again, I would look to what are the major publishers doing, and right now they're releasing print book, ebook, and audiobook, so that the buyer has the choice of the format that they prefer. That can get pretty expensive, but I would say at the very least, start with a print book and an ebook, and then consider audio after that.
Mm-hmm. And there's that similar process I went through with the mistakes that make us hiring a company that's an audiobook specialist, in terms of a recording technology and just the producing of knowing, how it should sound, both technically and for me as the reader of it. But again, like, there were a lot of choices. I could have hired a narrator. I mean, there's all these services that you could pick and choose from on doing the audiobook piece.
Oh yeah, now you could hire your own narrator, freelancer, right? That's a little bit risky because you have to make sure they know how to prepare the final files properly. Audible and Findaway are very particular in how those files need to be formatted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, again, like there's access and ability to publish directly on Audible, just the same as you could publish directly for Amazon Kindle, for the other ebook stores or the other print book stores.
Correct. The author side of Audible is acx.com.
Yep.
So you can go there. Findaway Voices is actually, some authors consider them a better platform for different reasons. I would say compare the two and see which one works for you.
Yeah. Well, and, for people who are looking at those different options, if they've got a manuscript and they're trying to figure out what to do, our guest today, Michele DeFilippo, and 1106 Design can help. So, Michele, as we wrap up here, let people know how they can find your website. What's kind of the first step if somebody is looking for your advice or considering if they want to work with you?
Okay, our website is 1106design.com, and there you'll find, like I said, all of our prices, all of our design samples, blog posts, educational materials. Anybody who wants to can put in an email address and receive a free copy of my book, Published Like the Pros, in PDF form. We're happy to talk to anybody, anytime, about anything without obligation.
Yeah. And again, if people want to do that, please contact Michele. And again, there's a wealth of great advice and resources and articles there on the website that I've pointed people to over the years for sure. So, Michele, thank you. Of all the different mistakes an author might make, some of it seems to parallel some of your story. Somebody might jump into one path a little bit too quickly, but we'll learn and adjust, or maybe get good advice and avoid the mistake to begin with.
That's right. Thank you, Mark. You've been a wonderful client, and I appreciate this opportunity.
Well, thanks, Michele. I'm glad your favorite mistake story wasn't saying like, "Oh, working with that guy."
No, believe me, I could tell you stories.
Well, that will keep you out of trouble there. So, Michele, thanks again.
Thank you.